Rabbi, I'm not hearing you. You're on mute.
Now do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Apologize about that. Thank you. Okay. So again, we took a little bit of a break since the last course, since the spring course. So always good to get back together once again. And the truth is, there's always an excitement to start a new course. But I believe it's important, and perhaps you could say critical, before we start talking about the course and about the content of the course, to take a moment and to speak about what's going on in the world, more specifically what's going on in Israel, and maybe how it pertains to what we are doing today, why we are sitting here learning today. You know, generally, as I start a new course, there's always an excitement, a certain excitement, especially the fall courses, I said, because for those that take my JLI courses, I generally do there's the fall, there's the winter, there's the spring, so there's a little bit of a break. But now, like everything we do, there's a little bit of a pit in the stomach. There's a little bit of a lump in the throat as we're going throughout the day, thinking about our brothers and sisters who are going through their tough times, who are in danger. And therefore, I'd like to start off today, and I'd like to start off every single day with a chapter of Tehillim that we'll say together, praying, because ultimately, as Jewish people, in times of pain, times of sorrow, in tough times, we pray and we learn Torah. So I'd like to start off with a chapter of Tehillim, chapter 23. It's a very famous one. You can see it. It will be on the board. It's a little bit small. I'll read it in Hebrew, then I'll read it in English. If you're able to see, you can read along. Mizmar LeDavid, Adonai Ra'i Layachzar, Benozdesha Yarbitzeni, Almei Menucha Yisnahaleni. Nafshi Yishaviv Yamcheni Magli Tzedek L'man Shemai. Gam Ki Elech Begates Al Mavesh La'ira Kiati Madi. Shiftecha Mishantecha Heima Yanchuni. Tarech Lefanei Shulchan Neged Tzarei. Yishanta Vashemen Reishi Kaiser Vaya. Ach Toiva Chesed Dufuni Koyim Echaye V'Shafti Ves Adonai L'Arech Yamin. A psalm by David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still water. He revives my soul. He directs me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of his name. Even if I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they will comfort me. You will prepare a table before my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup is full. Only goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. I'd also like to dedicate today's class to a hero of the Jewish people. You know, many times when we hear the numbers, you get caught up by the numbers. But sometimes it's important to remember every single person was a full world and has their own story. So I'd like to dedicate today's class, and perhaps in the next couple classes, we'll dedicate each class to someone else. I'd like to dedicate today's class, you see on the board, a soldier whose name was Adi. Adi was 23 years old, and she spent her IDF service protecting the city of Sderot. When all hell was unleashed from Gaza on October 7th, she volunteered for reserve duty so she could help residents by doing what she does best. She was attacked by Hamas rockets on the way. Her boyfriend, who she met when she was 6, ended up proposing on her grave. After her death, her mother found this haunting poem on her computer, and she writes as follows: "If I die before my time, I want you to celebrate my life. Don't mourn my death. Wake up each morning with a smile and longing in your heart. Don't let a second of your life go to waste. See the world for me. Cherish each moment. And once in a while, smile to the clouds. I'll be there. Sorry for the pain I caused, and know I'm in a better place. I miss you and love you." So today's class, I'd like to dedicate to Adi. May our neshama have aliyah. May all those that lost their lives, may their neshama have aliyah. We're going to be learning now for them. We're praying for them, and obviously for those hostages that are still in the hands of evil, in the hands of terror. May they be returned home. And the question when I marketed this class, a few people asked me, like, should we be learning now? Is now the proper time to be learning Torah? And while it's I appreciate the sentiment, Jewish people throughout all our history, we've gone through very challenging times, and it's important to remember that. And sometimes, in the challenging times, we don't recognize the blessing we have. Throughout most of our history, when we had challenging times and we were persecuted and we were killed, we didn't have an army to fight back. We didn't have what to protect us with. So we have to recognize what we do have. But throughout our history, and whether this is 2,000 years ago when the Romans were killing us, 1,000 years ago in the times of the Cossacks and the Crusaders and the Inquisition, and throughout our history, 75 years ago by Nazi Germany, Jewish people have always turned to Torah. Torah has been that balm for the soul, that place of refuge. A couple of weeks ago, we read in the Torah the story of the flood and Noah going into the ark. Now, when it speaks about Noah going into the ark, what do we say? Noah went into the teva. Now, what is a teva? Teva is the ark. What is the more regular word for a boat, for an ark? Is a sfina. For those who know Hebrew, teva is not really generally used for a boat. A sfina is used. So why is the word teva used? So mystically is brought down that what is giving over the message, when Jewish people have been going through hard times, when Jewish people have been going through the flood waters of life, we enter into, teva also means the word. We enter into the words of prayer. We enter into the words of Torah. So therefore, when we are going through our time, and we're definitely going through a hard time now, both in Israel and really throughout the world, people are down, people are afraid, people seeing, people seeing the hatred out there. It's a time to turn to Torah. Therefore, it's appropriate time. And specifically this course, we're speaking about the course about Kabbalah. Kabbalah is considered the inner light of the Torah. And right now, perhaps more than anything, we need that inner light to be able to light up this world, light up our own lives, and light up all the evil that surround us. So with that, I'd like to start this course. And this course is a little bit different than past courses. Any course I really gave. When we speak about Kabbalah, Kabbalah is a very deep, very abstract. And there's going to be this, as we're going to speak about, there's going to be some of the very deep stuff, some things which we may have to probe deep and see things how they may not look on the outside. And they say a story of a rabbi who was going through some training. And, he's going through school, to rabbi school, and they're training him how to give a eulogy by a funeral. And they're training him, and he's going through the classes, and he's practicing. And finally, the day comes, and they say, now you are going to put your practice to work. So they say, you're going to go. There's someone who passed away, doesn't really have any family, doesn't have any friends, and we're not even sure if anyone's going to be by the funeral, but you're going to go there. Whoever is there, give a good eulogy. Give a eulogy like you mean it. So the rabbi prepares, and the next morning he goes and he drives, and on the way he gets lost. He's not even sure if he's in the right place. But finally, he gets there, and he sees no one's there besides for some workers who he sees already, they're already just shoveling the dirt. And he gets up and he stops them. He starts giving his whole spiel, and he starts giving, and this is he's speaking, and he's crying, and and he sees he's really touching them. And he's going on for 20 minutes. And finally he finishes. And when he finishes, one of the workers turned to him and says, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I've been working on septic tanks for 25 years. So sometimes when you look at something and it may not be as it seems. So too, when we take Kabbalah, what is Kabbalah about? Kabbalah is about probing deeply. Kabbalah is about taking this world, taking ourselves, and digging and trying to find things, trying to find areas which may not be on the surface. And that's really what this is about. So it's a deep course. Some parts of this course you may relate to, some you may not relate to, some may be a little bit deep. So try to stay with me. And again, obviously, questions are welcome. If it's something which may lead a little bit off topic, maybe I'll save it to the end just because we are limited in time and I try to always finish on time. But again, if it's a deep class, if you're going to sleep, at least have a deep sleep. So, Henny Youngman once said, I have a great doctor. Said, my doctor, if you can't afford the surgery for a tenth of the price, he'll touch up the x-ray. So, sometimes in life, we can't just touch up the x-ray. If we want to fix this world, we want to fix ourselves, we have to work on actually fixing it in the proper way.
And Young would also say that I love my wife so much, I take her with me everywhere, which she always finds her way home.
So, okay, now one other thing about this course. Some courses, each class is kind of disconnected from another one. This course really, it's a building. We're going to be building from the ground up. As we're going to see, there is a hierarchy. There is a different, and we're going to be starting from the bottom, working our way up. And therefore, if you miss a class, all classes will be recorded. First of all classes will be on Zoom. So if you're out of town or you can't come one week, you're welcome to join on Zoom. We have a few people here on Zoom right now. And also, they will be recorded. So I'm happy to send you a recording. So again, if you miss a class, it's not like you'll miss the essence of every class, but it would be recommended to catch up on a class. If you miss it, again, I will be happy to send you a recording. Okay, so everyone should have, again, if you don't have a book, there should be in the left-hand corner over there. In the inside fold of your book, you will find a little paper, a paper which folds out. Again, keep this. This is important. This is an important a piece of paper. This is going to be a map that we are going to be using throughout our 6 weeks, throughout our study of Kabbalah. One side is going to be the key terms. What I want you to do right now is you are going to go to the other side. And over here we have a map which is going to take us through all the different classes as we are going to show in one moment. Before we start, I'd like to ask a question. And that is, when you hear the word Kabbalah, what comes to mind? And again, without using the word mysticism, what comes to mind when you hear the word Kabbalah? Anyone? Madonna. Okay. Anyone else? Any other words that come to mind? What? Red. Okay. Magic. Okay. Spiritual. Okay. Anyone knows what the word Kabbalah literally means? Esoteric. Okay. Esoteric. Kabbalah literally means receive. To receive. Very good. Kabbalah literally means receive. In Israel, if you're going to get a receipt at a store, you receive a Kabbalah. So why is Kabbalah called that which is received? So again, we're not going to get into this, but the idea of Kabbalah is generally over every other part of Torah. Kabbalah was something which was generally received from teacher to student throughout all generations. It wasn't really written down. I mean, for those that joined us a year ago, we went through Booksmart, and certain parts of Torah were written, certain parts were oral, but even the oral parts were ultimately written down. The Kabbalah, although today we have a lot of books of Kabbalah wasn't generally, there wasn't a class to a whole group of students. Kabbalah was done one-on-one. It was received from teacher to student. Because again, Kabbalah can be dangerous. Kabbalah, many of you guys may have heard that there's a concept of not learning Kabbalah until you're 40. Again, what we're learning today is not that type of Kabbalah. It's not that going to be that abstract Kabbalah. But Kabbalah throughout all ages was something which was received from teacher to student. So this is the idea of Kabbalah. Kabbalah is, again, everything you said is correct. It's mystical. It's it's hidden. So some people say it's a little bit magical. But what we are going to be attempting to answer in the next 6 weeks are the following questions. And again, you can find it on page 3. Kabbalah, does it mean welcome? I'm not sure if it means. Yeah. Kabbalah also means yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess it comes from the word Kabbalah, receive. You're receiving someone, you're welcoming someone. Okay, for those that are on Zoom, I just shared in the chat. a file, and there you have you could download that, and there you're going to have everything you need for everything we're learning today. Again, for those that are on Zoom. Okay, you should have received it in the chat if you open up the chat box. Okay. So we are going to be discussing the following questions. You can find it on figure 1.1, page 3. Will also be on the board over here. What is Kabbalah? What are its central teachings? What is the significance of some of its key terms, like Sefirot? Many people, when they hear Kabbalah, they know Sefirot, the 10 Sefirot. And finally, how are these teachings relevant to my everyday life? This is, and perhaps the final question, the fourth question, is going to be that which is the most important, most critical of those questions. And why is that? Because Torah is never just about the abstract. Torah has to make a difference in our life. I remember my father says a story. The one time he was on an airplane, he was sitting next to someone, and it happens to be this person was a Jewish guy, and he was a professor in Kabbalah. So my father was speaking to him, and then towards the end of the flight, my father says, "Do you want to do a mitzvah together?" The guy says, "No, I don't do mitzvahs." So my father says, "What do you mean? You teach Kabbalah? Kabbalah is all about Torah and mitzvahs and the divine." He says, "No, I teach it as a subject." And while that may be what some people, you hear about different people who are into Kabbalah, but they take it, they strip it from anything practical. This is not a Jewish idea. And when we speak, Judaism says everything has to be grounded. Everything has to come down into the practical. There's a story of the fourth Chabad Rebbe. His name was Reb Shmuel of Lubavitch. And one time he had a student. Who came to him, and he started questioning him. What do you do in the morning? He said, I think about God. What do you do? No, I spend some time learning, and the evening I think more about God and the divine, and I pray. And the student thinks he'll be all happy with it. And finally, the Rabbi Shmuel of Lubavitch tells him, if the whole day you're thinking about God, when do you have time to think about yourself? In other words, the message he was saying is that it's being a good person is not just about stripping yourself from this world and ascending and sitting on a mountain. It's all about taking the abstract ideas and bringing them down over here, taking the Torah and letting the Torah have an impact into into our daily life, into our relationships, into how we interact with one another, how we do a mitzvah. So that's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to do the next 6 weeks. The goal, Jewish mysticism, is not a spirit for spiritual enlightenment as an end in itself. The goal, rather, is to shift perspective and empower growth. And therefore, when we speak about Kabbalah, and some of it's going to seem abstract, ultimately the goal is not going to be to remain in the heavens, but it's to be able to come down to here. There's a term ascetic, and there's a term Hasidic. What's the difference? Ascetic is to be able to leave this world and to ascend, to go somewhere higher, to go to a higher realm. Hasidic is to take that which is higher and bring it down into this world. This is a very what? That's not literally what it means. But Hasidic, what is the teachings of Hasidic? Hasidic telling us is to take that which is godliness and take that which is above and bring it down into this world. And so therefore, the final question is going to be the most important, which every single class, although we will be discussing that which is abstract and that which is ascetic, that which is above and beyond us, we'll also be spending some time bringing it down into our lives, how we can make it practical into our lives. So let's take a look at some of the classic Kabbalah charts. Now, if you take a look at the screen, you also could see this on your page number 4 and page number 5. On page number 4, on the left-hand side of the board. Anyone recognizes that? That looks familiar to anyone here? That is a very classic Hasidic chart. If you put into Google Images, Kabbalah, chances are you will see that image on the left-hand side. That was written by someone. His name was Moshe Cordovero. Moshe Cordovero was a big Kabbalist. He was one of the major Kabbalists. He lived in the 15th century. The 15th century, he was, perhaps you could call this the golden time of Kabbalah. This was in the city of Tzfat. Many of you guys, some of you may have been in Tzfat. Tzfat is considered the city of the Kabbalists, and he lived there. This was a time. This was a little bit after the expulsion of Spain, and many people left Spain, and ultimately found their way to Israel. And in Israel, somehow, some reason, whatever that reason is, I'm not sure, but it seemed like all the Kabbalists kind of found Tzfat. And he was one of the major Kabbalists of this day. So he was perhaps the most famous Kabbalist, which we'll be mentioning quite a few times throughout this course, is the Arizal. He was actually a teacher of the Arizal. And this is a very well-known chart. On the right-hand side, or on page number 5, you have a little bit of a lesser-known chart. And this was written by Rav Shabtai Sheftel Halevi Horowitz. He lived in Prague. He was a nephew. His uncle was a lot more famous than him. His uncle was, you can probably recognize the name, the Maharal of Prague. Maharal of Prague, he was, today you go to Prague and there's one shul that still remains, the shul of Prague. His uncle, the Maharal of Prague, was the rabbi of that city, a Kabbalist in his own right. And he writes this, and he makes this chart. And as we'll see, we'll be getting back to this chart. We'll be making some sense of at least one aspect in this chart as we go along today. Now, what do these texts mean? What do these charts mean? So we were going to start with text number 1. And text number 1 is a very important text. Text number 1, and if you're going to get anything from this course, even if just this one text is worth it already. Because this text number 1, again, page number 6, says as follows. A mortal is a mirror for the supernal reality. All that exists in both higher and lower realms is present in microcosmic form within the human. This is the deeper significance of the Torah statement that the human was created in the divine image. And this is why we say, from my flesh, I envision God. What is this text saying? And it's saying something very profound. There are 2 verses here. It says we're created in the divine image. Yeah, this is something which you may have heard many times. Humanity was created in the divine image. What does this mean? Ever take a look? What does such a word mean? What does it mean that we are created in the divine image? Are we saying that divine has a certain image that looks like a human? And we say, from my flesh, I envision God. How are we to understand this? If we're to understand this literally, that God has some sort of physical features, not only is it wrong, but that's idolatrous. God, that was a Greek philosophy that the perfect human was a God. But all over Torah, we say we cannot describe any type of physical features to God. And even when in the Torah we do speak about God's features, God's outstretched hand, that's all metaphorical. God has no physical features. So what does it mean that we were created in the divine image? What does it mean that I can look at my own flesh and envision God? What it means is, as he says, is that our makeup mirrors the divine makeup and process. Just like if you have a child, that child is going to have your DNA, and there's going to be similarities between the child's makeup and your makeup. So too, although God obviously does not have any physical features, God, again, that would be problematic to give any physical features to God. But when we speak about we are creating the divine image, what that means is that just like we have different processes and different capabilities, which we'll speak about, that is also how we can speak about, we can understand God from us and vice versa. So we'll say this. Now you can take your chart. You can take your chart that you have, and you will see on one end, on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, we have how it is in godliness. And we're going to work our way up. Lesson 1 is going to be the bottom. Lesson 2 is going to be above that. Lesson 3, 4, 5, and lesson 6 is going to be off the charts, not even on the map. On the right-hand side, this is how it corresponds to the human being. Because again, we are a mirror. God and us is a mirror one to another. Again, obviously, God is on the physical features, but through understanding ourselves, we can understand how it works by God and vice versa. So therefore, what we are going to do is take a look at how things work in godliness, when we speak about the divine and how that mirrors down in our own world. So let's give an example of how this idea works and how we see the mirror. We often speak about God creating this world as a home for God. And there's that, the Medrash says, why did God create this world? Lasot lo dira b'tachtona, to make for himself a dwelling place, a place to live. Now, when it comes to buying a house, Kabbalah compares the process of a person buying a house to how God created this world. Again, God, so to say, bought this house for himself when he created this world. God's making a home.
What was the mortgage rate?
I don't know what the mortgage rate was. But God created, now, what is the process of a person buying a house? So a person may think just going to the bank. But the truth is, Kabbalah tells us the process of buying a house goes way beyond saving up the money or even thinking about buying the house. The first step that in your mind, but even before that, the first step Kabbalah tells us when a person buys a house is the concept that a person has pleasure. There's a core pleasure of a person having a house, having something which belongs to them. Otherwise, why are you buying it? If it doesn't cause you pleasure, you're not going to buy it. Again, we're not necessarily even talking about on a conscious level. Subconsciously, there is pleasure by a person having a house. That's step number one. Step number two, Kabbalah tells us, and we're going to pleasure from having a house. What is the second step? Having that pleasure, bringing it down to having a desire. I have a desire for a home. That's step number two. Step number three is now, once you have that desire, now you bring it down to my intellect. You'll understand why I should want a house, what type of house I want to have. Next one is justify the endeavor logically. I'm also putting on the screen, if you take a look at the screen. The fifth step, Kabbalah tells us, is explore how each option would make you feel. Bring it down to motion. Which house do you want to want? Which house do you want? Do you want a house what type of house? Which neighborhood? How do you want it to look on the outside and the inside? The next step is to rethink your plan. After going, you have to rethink it, and you're going to rethink it many times. Finally, you're going to speak it over, talk to people, consult with people, speak to your financial advisor. And finally, the last step is the signature handshake. So Kabbalah tells us, for a person, again, Kabbalah says, for a person before a person buys the house, there are 7 steps in order for a person to actually own the house. When God created this world, it says that God went through these same 7 steps. And what we are going to speak about over the next couple of weeks is these 7 steps. Today, we are going to start with, on the bottom, the final 3 steps. Rethinking the plan, the speaking it over, the signature handshake, so to say, how it pertains to creation of this world. But just like, and again, here's where we see there is a mirror. How things work down here in our own soul, that is how it works. That is how it works above. Okay, I've been speaking for a while. Any questions or comments?
There's an 8th step too. Like, you gotta wait 15 or 30 years before you actually own.
Right. Okay, now what if we take a yes.
Yeah. Philosophical.
Yes. Well,
as opposed to hands-on.
So what we're going to do, we're going to be taking. We have an hour left. It's 8:00. We finish at 9:00. For first half hour, we are going to be discussing that which is more abstract, that which is more in the divine when we're speaking about God, and how it pertains to the creation of this world. And then the next half hour, we're going to bring it down to ourselves, into our own world, and how to make it more practical. So that's, again, as I started off, Kabbalah is abstract, but the idea is not for it to remain abstract, is to take these abstract ideas and bring it down to the practical. So that's where every single class, we're going to have that, so to say, each part is going to take a part of the class. We're going to have the abstract part and the practical part. So right now we're speaking about in the divine, the abstract part. Soon we're going to bring it down to practicality. Okay. Yes. God willing. Okay. So this brings us to text number 2. Text number 2 says as follows. God fashioned, this is written by Rav Moshe Alshich, another Kabbalist. God fashioned a ladder placed on earth, whose top reaches into the heavens. This ladder rung serves as channel through which the flow of divine energy can devolve degree after degree in a constant pattern of progressive coarsening until the flow can be received at the lowest extreme of existence. What is he talking about? What does this mean? So what he means is as follows. How are we able to get from no world at all, from godliness, to this coarse world, to this evil world, to this dark world, to this material world? Again, before God created this world, there was nothing. There was no houses, there was no light, there was no dark, there was nothing. And today we have everything. We have houses, we have light, we have dark, we have cars, we have evil, we have Hamas, we have darkness. How did it get from nothing all the way down to this world? So what he's explaining over here is perhaps the central idea of Kabbalah. Again, the system of going from absolutely godliness to come down into this world. And this is what is called, and here we're going to have key term number one. Throughout the 6 weeks, every week, we're going to be learning between 5 or 6 or 7 new terms, 41 key terms, Kabbalistic terms. You could spit out these terms and pretend like you're a Kabbalist. If you turn over your page, you have it at lesson number 1, again on the other side, or you can have it inside your book on page number 7. Key term number 1, and you may have heard this word before, is Seder Hishtalshelut. It's a hard word. Seder Hishtalshelut. What does that mean? The system of devolution. Again, we here know about evolution. This is devolution. How things come down on a lower level. How things are the many degrees of systematic descent that stretch between God's desire to create the universe and the tangible result of that goal. Again, how do we get from all the way before God created this world from nothingness to this world? You have to have this Seder Hishtalshelut, this order of devolution, which slowly makes godliness less and less godly until we have this world which has a capability of evil, which has a capability of physicality. It can't come from, it doesn't happen in 1 second. There has to be an order over here. There has to be this system of devolution. And that's what we're going to be discussing today and the next couple of days. What is Kabbalah? Kabbalah is a sophisticated exploration of the order of devolution, how things came from up and high down into this world. So now why is this important? Why is it important to study how this world came to be? Why is this important? Let some Kabbalists learn it. Why is it important for me and you to have this study? And the reason why this study is important is, first of all, we want to learn about God and his ways. In one of the mitzvahs, it says, Da es Elokei avicha. Know your God. Know the God of your parents. Part of becoming better people is knowing a little about godliness, trying to study what we can know. We're obviously limited. We're not going to be able to know everything. But whatever we can, that is something which is a good thing to do. But perhaps the greater reason is the more we know about our source, where we came from, the better choices we'll be able to make in life. By way of an example, someone who knows the code behind the computer code, they'll have a better ability to navigate that computer because they know the tricks behind it. They know what's behind the monitor. So too, if we are able to know a little bit behind the monitor, we're able to know about the source and how we came to being, we'll have a better idea how to live our life in a meaningful way, how to see this world in a meaningful way. And that is why Kabbalah is so important. Kabbalah is not just about the abstract. Kabbalah is about me waking up in the morning and making a better choice. And that's what this is about, to learn about God and his ways. And the background information can help us make better choices. Now, before we go on, there's a very important warning. And this is something which we have to start off with. which is something which many people make a mistake with. And that is as follows. Many people, when they hear we're going to be speaking about different worlds, many people make the mistake that they take these Kabbalistic terms in literal physical concepts. When you speak about 4 different worlds, they're going to say, there's different worlds, one on top of another, different globes on top of another. It's very important to recognize that when we speak about Kabbalah and we speak about terms, we have to strip them of their physical meaning. We're not talking about physical features. We're talking about that which is spiritual. But we're using physical language. By way of an example, when I say there's 2 people in a company, one person is higher up in the company than the other. Does that mean that person's on a higher floor or taller than the other person? No, it just means that they're at a higher level. So when we speak about different worlds, and one world is higher than the other world, we're not talking about that there's a world and 50 miles up there's another world. We're talking about realms. We're talking about ideas. Because again, we're not talking about that which is physical. We're talking about spiritual. So this is a very important idea. As we see in text number 3, this is from the Rav Shneur Zalman Liadi, the saintly Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov taught that when studying works of Kabbalah, we must be careful not to perceive the Kabbalistic ideas as literal physical concepts. Again, strip them from their literal ideas and recognize them as our more spiritual ideas, and we're using concepts. So again, when we speak about worlds, we're speaking about realms, we're speaking about levels, we're speaking about ideas. We're not talking about that which is physical. Okay, now we're ready to start the class. We're 40 minutes in, but this is all introduction till what Kabbalah is, what we're trying to do. And now we are going to actually start with the class, and I'd like you to open up your map again, and we are going to start from the bottom. Now, let me ask you, have any of you guys heard of different world, Kabbalah speaking about different worlds? How many different worlds are there? Again, not physical world, but spiritual world. 4. Very good. There are 4 different worlds out there. There's 10 Sefirot. Many people would answer 10, but that's a Sefirot, which we'll discuss next week. There are 4 different worlds. Today, we're going to discuss 3, the bottom 3. The next, the 4th one is going to be for a different week. We are going to start off with 3 terms which are called Asiya, Yitzira, and Beriya. Or from top to bottom is Beriya, Yitzira, and Asiya. Each world is a different realm in order to create this physical world. Again, I want to repeat myself. In order to go from nothing to a physical world, you have to go through a process. You have a nuclear plant. We get our energy from a nuclear plant. What would happen if you go to a nuclear plant and you would take your cell phone and try to stick your cell phone into the nuclear plant? It would explode. It's way too much power in order to charge your cell phone. What has to happen? A whole system, and again, I don't know this. I don't know nuclear energy, but a whole system of devolution, taking the power from the nuclear plant and lowering it, making it smaller in order that ultimately it could come to your house and power up your oven and power up your alarm clock and power up your cell phone. It's the same power from the power plant, from the nuclear plant, but it has to devolve in order for us to be able, for my cell phone to be able to handle it. It has to go through transformers, that's the word, transformers, in order to ultimately be able, we could benefit from it. So too, we cannot go from complete godliness to this world in one swoop. We need transformers. We need transformers to lower the energy in order to then be able to have this world. What are those transformers? Those transformers are these 3 worlds. These 3 worlds of Beriya, Yitzira, and Asiya.
Like solar power, the way it comes down.
Yeah, and then as it is in the sun, we wouldn't be able to survive. It's way too powerful. Same idea. As godliness is, in its pure, unadulterated form, way too powerful for us. In order to be able to have this world created, we have to bring it down. Yes.
way, so you have to bring down, sort of step down, taking power and you're taking it from your 110 and you're putting it into yourself as a more great. So they're coming over.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about in a spiritual sense as well. In order for God to be able to create this world, it had to be in steps. It had to be with transformers in order to be able to get where we are today. What are these three worlds? So let's first speak about them in the text, see what they are called, and then we'll discuss what each of them mean. Text number 4, there are 3 form terms of creation. Sharon, you want to read page number 9?
God's glory includes Kabbalah, and God bestowed this on humanity. God's glory includes Yetzirah, and God bestowed this on humanity. God's glory includes Asiya, and God bestowed this on humanity. Thus, the human is the writer in the creation and the supreme one.
So again, when God created this world, there were 3 stages of development. The first stage, that which is called Beriah. This is the first step from nothing to something. Ex nihilo to this world, to something. What is this something at that point? This something is just unidentified matter. Then we have the next step, which is Yetzirah. Yatsar means that which is fashioned. And finally, the third step is Asiya, that which God made. Again, as I mentioned before, everything that God created, everything in godliness, we are a mirror below. We also have these 3 steps of development. What is the first stage of a human? What is the first stage of a human being? Embryo. The embryo. The embryo is the first stage. That before the embryo, there was nothing, and now the first stage is that embryo. Now, while it's the embryo, are there any features you could see? You can't see if it's male or female. You can't see anything. It is just that cell, that embryo. That is the first stage. That is Beriah. That is the first world. What is the next stage? The next stage is the 9 months of how it's forming, how the fetus is forming, getting hands and feet and a gender and everything. It forms from that embryo to a fully formed, to something which is fully formed. That is Yetzirah. What does Yetzirah mean? That which is formed. Over here, we're taking, again, the embryo of creation and making a form out of it. And finally, after the fetus, what happens? The final step, Asiya, you have baby Moshe. You have a baby. You have a child. You have a fully formed child who is fully independent, leaves its mother, and it becomes fully independent. So too in creation. First, you have the first step is from nothing to something. That something is not formed at all. It's just, you want to call it a speck. That is the first step of something outside of God. Something which is not in God. Then you have the second step, Yetzirah, where it becomes already formed. It forms a little bit, some more features. And then finally you have Asiya. Asiya means where God actually made something, where it becomes fully independent. These are the 3 stages of development. You have the embryo, then you have the fetus, and then you have the full physical maturity. So too you have Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. This mirrors creation of the world, mirrors the creation of the human being. And this, I'll understand, if we will go to the second key term, Kabbalistic term we'll learn today, the second key term, you can find it on page number 10. This is Biyah. What does Biyah mean? Biyah is not a word. Biyah is an acronym. Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, spell out the first letter of each word is Biyah. When we speak about the creation, created, shaped, made. When we speak about creation of this world, of this physical world, it goes through this process of Biyah. First, again, the Bria, just that is where we have that point from nothing, from just godliness to something outside of godliness. Then it becomes more formed, and then it becomes that which is fully formed. Now, so over here we have each world conveys a different stage of development in our independence from God. Again, before there was creation of this world, there was nothing that was independent of God. Everything, God was everywhere. God was everything. What is creation? Becoming less and less dependent upon God, having a feeling of I exist. These are the stages of these three worlds. When it came to Berea, there was still, although there was already a certain sense of not complete dependence upon God. Yetzirah becomes a little bit less dependent upon God. Till Asiya, we have this world and we walk around. Do we feel dependent on God? No. We could pray to God and we could believe in God, but a person could go through their whole life without thinking they need God, because this is the lowest world. This is how we are, so to say, fully formed, fully independent in our minds of God. Now, if we go back to the chart, the original chart, I said, go back to the chart, the two charts I mentioned before, which you can find on page. Which page is it? Page 4 and 5. Page number 5. Again, I said this is not that important, but I said, well, maybe gain some knowledge of this chart. In page number 5, on that chart, what do we see over there? If you see again, it's very small. I recognize it's very small, but where it starts, Olam Habria, where it says Olam Hapirud Bria. Again, it is from the middle. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6. It's going up 6 lines from the middle, going up 6 lines. Bria, again, it's very small. Bala, you could trust me on this. It says the world of Berea is the world of separation. Why is this called the world of separation? Because above this world, there was nothing that was separated from God. Everything was one with God. The first world is where a certain sense of independence of God, a separation from God started. That's another reason why, if you look at the side on the right and the left, there's a bunch of letters. There's a bunch of letters. It stops at a certain point. It stops by Berea. Why? Because above that, those are names of God. Above that, God is present in all those worlds. From Berea, Yetzirah, Asiya. These are where physical matter, this is where worlds start, which seem independent of God. Because this is the process. In order to go from God to this world where we don't see God, we need to have these 3 stages. We have to have the world of separation and the absence of divine name. This is the steps in how to be able to create this world. Which leads us to another word, which is called the word of Yeshus. What does Yeshus mean? This is page number 10, key term 3. Yeshus literally means existence. Existence with a sense of self-awareness and independence. What happened in this world? We have a sense of existence, of independence. In the higher worlds, again, above Bria Yetzirah Asiya, above Bia, there is no self of independence. Over there, they recognize the only true existence is God. What happened by creation? There was a certain sense of we exist. Berea, that feeling is a lot less than in Yetzirah. And in Yetzirah, it's more than Berea, but it's a lot less than Asiya. What happened in Asiya? Asiya is the final step. Asiya is this world. Asiya is where we fully feel independent. Let me give a way of example. I gave an example of the forming of a human being. Let's speak about the next stage. A child, a baby. Let's speak about my baby Moshe. 2 weeks old.
You can plan this.
So is he an independent being? Yes. Does he feel any independence? He recognizes, the baby recognizes that it fully needs its mother in every step of the way. Even a couple of months old, they need their mother. They have no independence whatsoever. while they are separated from their mother, but they fully feel dependent on its mother. Even my show, who's 2 years old, also feels dependent on its mother. It can't last without its mother. Let's go a couple years later. Let's take my Mendel, for example. My Mendel already is more formed. He's already feels a lot more independent. He has his own feelings. He has his own moods. He tells us when he wants to go to school, when he doesn't want to go to school, where he wants to go, what his birthday present should be. A lot more independence there. But could you call him independent? I can't leave. We can't leave him for a night. He still needs us. He needs us to pack his lunch. He's a lot, again, compared to my Shaul or my Moshe, he's a lot more independent. But he's still you can't call him independent. You can't call him completely independent. And then you have a teenager. A teenager is someone who they fully feel independent. Their parents are the most corny and the most terrible people around, and who wants to speak to them? Now, they're a lot more independent from the first stage of the baby or even the child. As a person gets further away from their source, they become more independent. So too in the worlds. As the world gets further away from God, feel less of a connection to God, less of a feeling of dependence upon God. So while in Berea you have that infant, in Berea still pretty much feels fully connected to Hashem. It's a little bit separated, but it feels it needs Hashem. If it doesn't feel, it's completely consumed by God. Yitzira, the next step where it's already formed, the formation, that's already the next step. It already a little bit more formed. Already has its moods. Already has its tendencies. Already feels more separated from Hashem. And finally, you have Asiya, which is down to this world. We're able to feel fully independent of God. We're able to people could go live a whole life without recognizing God. You could have a child, at a certain point, a teenager who cuts off ties with their parents, feels fully independent from their parents. This is the three steps of creation. The closer you are to God, the further away you are from God, the more of a yeshus, again, the third term that we talked about, the more of an existence, an independent existence you feel to Hashem. The closer you are to God, the more, what's the next term we're going to learn? The more batel you are to God. What does batel mean? Bittul. Bittul means, let's take a look at key term number 1.4, page number 13. This is where you are surrendered to God. The closer you are to God, the closer you feel to God. And the word term batel. Bittul is a very important term. This is a state we try to be ourselves. What does batel mean? Many people think of batel as humility, as someone who doesn't think highly of themselves. But this is not what bittul means. Bittul means, I one time heard, the difference between bittul and humility is thinking less of yourself. Bittul is thinking of yourself less. Again, there's a very big difference there. Thinking of yourself less means a low self-confidence. I don't really give myself much credit. Thinking of yourself less means I'm not thinking about myself. I'm subsumed in something greater than myself. A person that everyone experiences at certain times. Sometimes it could be a certain part of nature you are. You're in a certain place and you're totally wowed. You're not thinking of yourself at that point. You may be at a concert. You may be in the presence of greatness. The closer you are to God, the more batel you are. And this is, the closer, the higher the world is, the more batel, the more nullified it is to God. And these are the 3 steps of creation. I want to read a text now. Text number 5, page number 12. Alan, go ahead.
Three rungs. Maria here. Oh, there are 3 rungs. Maria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Maria is the first introduction of the Yeshua, an independent self-concept. However, existence only developed into a complete yes at reaching The third stage, the reason the Yeshua develops gradually is because the initial stage of existence remains close to God, and his presence is very much sensed at this level. Then Berea evolves into Yetzirah, where the presence of God is somewhat concealed. Finally, Yetzirah evolves into Asiya, where God is completely concealed. At this point, the existence becomes a true Yesh and gains a complete sense of selfhood.
What do you see? Take a look at the screen. We have the Bria reality, being overwhelmed by his presence. At this point, while he is not God, but at this point, it's still at a stage, it's still at this infant stage where it's overwhelmed by his presence. It doesn't have its own identity at that point. It totally needs God. Then the next world of Yetzirah, this is already sensing God's presence. It's further away. It's the child who, on one hand, at a certain point, needs its parent, but also has less of that feeling of dependence. And finally, you have Asiya reality. God feels somewhat distant from us. And these are, one second, these are the three steps of creation. Now, when it comes to the child, the example of the child, the purpose is for a child, as it goes through life, to feel more independent and more independent. A healthy child. You know, a child growing up means, what is healthy? For a child to be less dependent on his parents. When it comes to godliness, it's the other way around. We want to go from a state of feeling independent of God to feeling more dependent upon God. We want to be able to climb the rungs of this world. We want to, while we are bored and throughout life, we generally don't feel we need God. The purpose of studying of Kabbalah and recognizing, about God and learning about God is to feel more dependent upon God. And this is ultimately, we want to get to more of a place, less of Yeshus, more of Bittul. Yeshus and Bittul, those two terms, are two sides of a coin. Yeshus means more feeling of self, of independence. Bittul is less of a feeling, more of a feeling of nullified yourself, becoming nullified to God. The closer you are to God, the more you are Bittul, the more you are nullified. The further you are from God, the more you feel independent. So when it came to creation of this world, what was the transformer? What was the transformer to take that nuclear energy, to be able to create this world? With everything in this world, you had to have these three stages. Bria, which is still feeling independent, still generally feels a dependence to God, although it's separate. Then you have Yetzirah, which lowers it a step, and then finally Asiya, which feels fully independent of God. These are the three steps. Yes, Baruch. Because this was the point of creation. God said, I want creatures that feel fully independent from me, and through living a good life and exploring, they should be able to become less of a Yeshus, more Bittul. God said, I want to create, again, so to say, in the reverse. I want people who are feeling independent of me to, through a life of searching and a life of being a good person, become more dependent on me. Make less, again, this world is full of Yeshus, and to become less of that through our lifetime, through a lifetime of work. Okay, what we're going to do right now, again, as I said, we are going to, the next stage of the class is going to be how this, and again, I recognize a lot of this is abstract. For some of you, this may, again, this is something which is books and books of Kabbalah. So again, we're giving a taste over here, but we are going to now bring it down into our reality, into our world, and how we are able to live a better life. But before that, we're going to show the lesson video. The lesson video acts as a little bit of a review of what we've already done. It might make it a little more clear. So here we go.
What is the Kabbalah? It's Judaism's mystical wisdom. It discusses souls, the deeper meaning of things, and the spiritual system of the
So I
heavens.
just want to make it a little bit louder. All right. Oh my. Okay. Second. Sorry about this. I shouldn't have touched anything here. Okay, let's try this one more time. Okay. Okay, sorry about this. Share screen. Share. Okay. Okay, here we go.
3 minutes, you got the verb.
What is the Kabbalah? It's Judaism's mystical wisdom. It discusses souls, the deeper meaning of things, and the spiritual system of the heavens. Never heard of this heavenly system? That's okay. Why don't we do what Kabbalah does best? Offer a parable to explain something abstract. You decide to build a home. Your plan actually begins with an intuition of pleasure. Deep within your subconscious, you sense the enormous pleasure of dwelling in a home that truly suits you. That spark of pleasure that invades your brain's desire center. I want a home, you tell yourself. Immediately, your intellect grabs the wheel. You logically justify your desire and analyze the possibilities. Your emotions chime in. How do I feel about this location? Am I comfortable with high windows? You carefully rethink your plan, you discuss it with friends, and are finally ready for action. Sign, build, move. What's all that got to do with heaven? The Kabbalah reveals that when God decided to create the physical world, God first created an entire spiritual system that parallels the experience we've just described. In this first video, we'll take a quick look at the final 3 stages of this system. In each subsequent video, we will climb one level higher as we explore this supernal chain of command. The mystical work titled the Zohar discusses the existence of 3 spiritual worlds that precede our own. Their names are Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. These worlds are inhabited by angels and souls, souls before they descend to earth, and those who have passed away and flourish in the afterlife. In Hebrew, the word Beriah means to create something from nothing at all. So in the spiritual world of Beriah, for the first time in the entire system, things exist that are aware of their own existence. They feel independent, outside of God. That's amazing, because nothing is independent of God. But in Beriah, God hides His presence to enable entities to emerge with a sense of self. Nevertheless, the angels and souls that inhabit Beriah feel tremendously close to God and are completely focused on God. Everything here is fragile, extremely close to losing its identity and being blissfully overwhelmed by proximity to God. So, God took it one step further and created the spiritual world of Yetzirah, which means to give shape to something. This is where the sense of independence from God truly begins to take shape. Here, God hides his presence to a far greater degree, which allows the spiritual inhabitants of Yetzirah to develop greater self-awareness. That said, God is still sensed in the spiritual place. And so, God made Asiya, which in Hebrew implies a complete and final product. From its perspective, the sense of independence from God is complete. Asiya has two linked layers. Its top layer consists of spiritual beings, and in its lower layer is our physical universe, the tangible, material world we know so well, where we struggle to relate to the divine force that continuously creates us. The good news, even as we reside in the physical Asiya, our souls keep a connection with those higher worlds from which they emanate. The spiritual Asiya helps us peer beyond the physical. Yetzirah empowers us to suspend our self-focus long enough to sense God's presence. And Beriah helps us feel blissfully overwhelmed by God's presence, at least momentarily, such as in a moment of meditative prayer. So, we walk planet Earth, but at the same time, we can be firmly rooted in the bliss of spiritual loftiness.
Okay. Now, we are going to move on to the next stage of this class, and that is bringing it down, as Donald said, to practical that we can understand a little bit more in this world. So let's bring this down again. As we said, everything which is divine mirrors down here. So we're going to take these concepts that we learned until now about the three worlds and the three stages of creation, or the order of devolution, in order to create this world, and we're going to figure out how that can help me live my life a better way. You know, if you want to, they say a story of Einstein was on a train. This is a true story. Einstein was on a train, and the conductor comes around collecting the tickets. Goes to Einstein, and Einstein goes through his pockets, can't find the ticket. Finally, the conductor realizes who it is, recognizes him, and says, "Don't worry, I know who you are. You don't have to worry about the, you don't have to worry." And the conductor keeps on moving on. And he looks back and he sees Einstein on his hands and feet, on all fours, looking for the ticket. And the conductor says, "Don't worry, we know who you are. We don't suspect you of anything." So Einstein gets up and he says, "I also know who I am, but I have no idea where I'm going." So in life, sometimes there's who I am and where we're going. So perhaps today it's easier to know where we're going in life, but the deeper question is, who am I? So today we'll probably the next couple of weeks we'll be here to try to figure out a little bit who we are on a deeper level. So we're going to do a exercise right now. Anyone here has a pen and paper? Okay. Can you write down 2 + 2 = 5? And I love moldy tofu. Moldy tofu. Can you write it down? You can write it down. Okay. Now, together, we are going to say it. 2 + 2 = 5. I love moldy tofu. Now, we are going to think it. We're going to think those words in your mind. Okay? We could do that. We could write it down. We could say it. We could think it. Now, I'm going to ask you, can you understand this? Can you understand the 2 + 2 = 5? Can you feel it? Can you feel the emotion of liking moldy tofu? Obviously not. Why is this? Why, when it comes to writing it down, to saying it, to even thinking it, it's possible to do it. But when it comes to feeling it, when it comes to the emotion, the intellect, you can't do that. And over here is a very important idea. When we speak about our thoughts, our speech, and our action. These are what's called, we're going to have the next key term, is levushe hanefesh. You see key term number 1.5. Garments of the soul. These are what's called the garments of the soul. What is a garment? What is clothing? Is clothing who you are? Clothing is not who you are. Clothing is what I wear. And today I could wear one clothing, and tomorrow I'll wear a different clothing. I could wear clothing which is comfortable for me. I could wear clothing which is uncomfortable for me. Does clothing define who you are? No. I could have walked in today, wearing basketball shorts and a shirt and basketball shoes. Doesn't mean I'm a basketball player. I'm wearing that. That's not who I am. When it comes to our thoughts, speech, and action, we say this is not who you are. And you have, just like clothing, you have the ability to change your clothing. So too, our thought, speech, and action, we have the ability to, it's not who we are. So I can say something which does not make sense. I can, write 2 plus 2 equals, say 2 plus 2 equals, I love moldy tofu, and you can think it. But understand, feel, you cannot do that. Because thought, speech, and action they can operate in ways that contradict your soul. Again, my feeling is who I am. My feeling, my intellect, that's who I am. I can't feel something. I can't feel a love towards something which I don't love. You can tell me all day long, love moldy tofu, feel that love. I can't do that because that's who I am. I could think it, I could say it, I could speak it, but it's not who I am. Oh, okay, because then it becomes who you are. But we're talking about if you don't like it. If you don't like it, and most people won't like it. So now I could say I like it. I could think I like it, but I can't really feel I like it. This is what's called the garments of the soul, the levushe hanefesh. If you take a look at page 14, levushe hanefesh, the soul's garment, thought, speech, and action. The soul's behavior, which are external to the soul itself. Here is the key point. They are not who you are. They're external to who you are. Just like clothing is external, you could wear one thing and you could wear something else. So too thought, speech, and action. They can be easily changed. They are referred to as levushim, garments of the soul, and they have their own identity. And here is the final idea. We're speaking about the mirror of what we spoke about before in godliness, how it's in our own souls. The Biyah we mentioned before. The Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, the 3 stages of creation. Again, Bria is, what do we say? Bria is where there's less of a independence from God. Yetzirah, there is a little bit more independence of God. And Asiyah is where there's most independence of God. Thought, speech, and action correspond to Biyah. Just like Bria, which was the highest level, is the least independent of God. This is our thought. Is our thought independent from us? Our thought is not who we are. As I said, I could think I love moldy tofu, even though I don't love moldy tofu. I could think those words. But compared to speech and action, what is more close to me? My thought, my speech, my action? Obviously, my thought. You don't know what's in my thoughts right now. And my thoughts constant. I can't stop thinking. It's a lot more an expression of who I am. So while it's independent of, it is not me. And that's why I can think of crazy things. I can think of something, I can think of falsehoods, but it's a lot closer to me. Just like we said, Berea, while it's separate from God, it still doesn't have that full independence of God. Yetzirah is speech. Speech is more independent from me, more separated from me than my thoughts. My speech, I could speak to you. And something I don't do I don't always speak. I always think. I don't always speak. It's more separate from me. This is speech, which is, again, this is the second stage of creation. As we said, the second stage of creation was less dependent on God, more independent, so to speak, is less me than thought. And finally, we have action. Action is fully independent of me. I make something. I'm an inventor. I make something. And what? Now I walk away. It's still there. It's totally independent of me. This is like Dacia, the final stage of creation, where God creates a world which feels fully independent of God. So here we have the mirror of, in the three stages of creation, of Bria, Yitzir, Asiya, in our own souls. This is thought, speech, and action. The three correspondents. We have thought, senses the soul's feeling more forcefully. Yeah, I'm able to, you're able to think, there's a term, I can't put my thoughts into words. Why is that? Why can't you put your thoughts into words? Many times a person has that. Because my thoughts are a lot more my soul's feeling than I could express. So this is thought. It constantly churning within us and remains unknowable to others. So again, while it's external from who we are, it's not who I am, but it's a lot closer to me. Then you have that. This is Berea. This is the stage of Berea. Then you have speech. Speech doesn't run constantly. Again, thought runs constantly. Speech is already something which is further away from me. There are times they're quiet. There are times they're speaking. As a rabbi, there's more speaking than quiet. But there's again, it's not full. It's less me than my thoughts, and observable to outward expression, and no separation between the words and the speaker. This is speech, which is and it's also not tangible. This is Yitzira. And finally, you have the action, the world of action, which is our action, which exists outside of us, and it's physical and tangible. This is the world of Asiya. So here we have the mirror of the three worlds of creation. How to go from godliness to that which is outside of godliness, the transformer, to be able to make this physical world, we have within us, in our thought, speech, and action, which are separate from us. Yet, thought is a lot more connected to us, and then goes speech, and then goes action. Now, what is the lesson for this? How can this affect my day-to-day life? So we have 10 minutes left, and I like to, using this model of thought, speech, and action, I like to speak about two different ideas, how this can affect the way we conduct our life. The first thing is that when a person is going to make an important decision, it is important to follow these three steps of thought, speech, and action. And what do I mean by that? Many of us, or most of us perhaps, are good in the thought, speech, and action arena. We may be good at one and not so good at other. There are three steps in making a decision. First thing is thinking about it, strategizing, having those thoughts. The next step is speaking it over, speaking to someone else, consulting with someone else. Is this a good idea? Human beings, we're called medabra, which means we speak. Part of the gift we have is we can speak something over with someone else, get their opinion. And finally, there is asiya, the actual action of that idea. Many people have many ideas in their head, but they never bring it down to action. So many people just do actions, have actions, they do things without thinking about it, without strategizing. And many people, they have an idea and they do it, but without consulting with anyone else, without finding out, is this a good idea? They thought about it for a day and they said, in their mind, this is a good idea. They did it without the middle step. Mm-hmm. In the form of creation, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, and how it mirrors itself in our world of thought, speech, and action. The first lesson is, whenever you have to make a decision in life, make sure you go through the three steps. The three steps to making an important decision should be thought, speech, and action. First, you have to think, strategize, and plan. That is the thought. Number two, and again, it has to be in this order. If it's not in this order, you're messing up creation. God created the world in these three steps. We have these three steps. It has to be this way. Number two, consult with friends, experts, and mentors, which is speech.
What if you don't?
So you're lacking in the full, in how God created this world in a certain system. You could do it, but this is the healthy approach of doing it. The healthy way of making a decision is if we follow these three steps. finally to implement the decision into reality. And people that don't follow those steps, many times it's lacking. If a person does something without thinking, we know how that is.
This is consulting with friends.
The best way, the most healthy way, and again, this is something which is very easily proven. The best way of making a decision and bringing it down is if you're not just relying on yourself, is speaking to someone over. Is this a good idea? How should I do it? Many times you have a good idea, but you speak to someone and they tell you how to make it a better idea. So if we want to be able to make decisions in life, we have to follow the order of creation, which is thought, speech, and action. I want to turn to, we'll get back to some other texts. I want to turn to text number 9. Text number 9, which tells us this idea. Text number 9. Karen, you want to read? Page 29. There's a lot of material here. We're not going to get to all of it. We'll be going back a little bit to some of the other ones.
And guided by 3 things: thought, speech, and action. First comes thought. Those thoughts are then expressed via speech to others, such as when consulting friends who understand a specific field for the sake of arriving at a clearer and more accurate picture of the matter. This allows the person to arrive at a practical conclusion, whereby their thoughts and discussions are translated into concrete action. Thought alone is insufficient. Similarly, contemplation with subsequent discussion is not enough. We must bring our plans to action. At the same time, in order for that action to be complete, it must reflect to the way that it is simply the third link in a chain following forethought and helpful discussion. Otherwise, our actions will be rash. When we engage all 3, thought, speech, and action in that particular order, we can reach our full potential, just as the hierarchy of the world is complete, only with all 3 worlds present in their specific order.
So this is the first message, the first lesson. We want to come out with something from this tangible in this class, is that if we want to be able to make our best decisions, we have to follow the order of creation. God created this world with the 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, and that is the form of order of devolution to make this world into a physical place independent of God. In our souls, the mirror of that is thought, speech, and action. Before making a decision, we should follow this guidance. First, think about it, strategize, then speak it over, and then come to bring it down to the action. I want to do one more. Again, we don't have that much time left. I'll only get to your question at 5 minutes. One more idea. Perhaps it's the most powerful idea. And again, I'm not giving justice with the 5 minutes we have. But here is the next practical idea, which can help us. This is for those that have learned Tanya. Tanya speaks about what I'm going to say now extensively. And this is a very powerful idea. And that is, just as we said, Biyah is outside. Again, the 3 worlds are outside of God's identity. And our thought, speech, and action is not who we are. It is our clothing. It's our garments. We could change it. I could say something which is untrue, which I don't feel. I could think something which I don't feel. So even if we struggle, and every one of us struggles, we struggle with emotions. It could be feelings of sadness. It could be feelings of anger, resentment. It could be different emotions that we have, different intellect we have. Everyone struggles. These do not need to be expressed in our thought, speech, and action. And this is a very, many people think, I'm thinking of these terrible thoughts all day. What do you want from me? It brings me down. What we are saying right now is just like we are able to change our garments, we're able to change our clothing. We also have the ability to change our thought, speech, and action. Action is very easy. I don't have to do what I want to do. I also don't have to speak what I want to speak. I could be feeling to say something, but I don't have to say it. Even our thoughts, which most people think of, how can I change my thoughts? We have the ability, and it might take some time, it might take some exercise. We have the ability when certain feelings of, again, I'll just use an example, a feeling of sadness comes. I have a way of that could divert that. And whether that's having something else in your mind at the same time, thinking of something positive, we have the ability, even if you may struggle with feeling of sadness in general, you have the ability not to think about it and not to speak about it and not to act upon it. And I want to read an article from a scientist, and he writes this after 40 years of research. He writes is pretty extreme, but we're going to see what Kabbalah answers to this. I'm reading from an article now. Stanford scientist, after decades of study, concludes we don't have free will. After more than 40 years studying humans and other beings, other animals, Sapolsky, again, this scientist, has reached the conclusion that virtually all human behavior is as far beyond our conscious control as the convulsions of a seizure, the division of cell of the beatings of our heart. This means accepting that a man who shoots into a crowd has no more control over his fate than the victims who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It means treating drunk drivers who barrel into pedestrians just like the drivers who suffer a sudden heart attack and veer out of their lane. This is what he writes, 40 years of research. Now, while this is extreme and disturbing to hear, and obviously society does not agree with what he writes, because the whole idea of justice and a system of justice obviously says that we do give a person responsibility. But what is Kabbalah's answer to this? Kabbalah's answer, as we're saying right now, is that while you may feel something, doesn't mean you have to act upon it. Doesn't mean you have to speak about it. Doesn't even mean you have to think about it. Because those are not you. Who am I? My feelings, my expressions, my intellect. But what I do on a daily basis, the choices I make are not who I am. And just like when it comes to clothing, sometimes, there's the comfortable clothing you have. There is the t-shirt and the slacks that you put on. And then sometimes you recognize for this time, I need to put on something uncomfortable. I need to wear, whether it's I'm going to an event, so I'm putting on, for a woman, it might be the heels, for the man, it might be the suit, whatever it is. Because I need to look in a certain way. So too, when we're speaking about our expressions of our soul, while I may feel a certain feeling of sadness, it doesn't mean I have to wear that clothing. I could choose to put on a clothing right now, which is uncomfortable for me, which is not what I'm feeling right now. I could put on a clothing of happiness. I could focus on something which is positive. In other words, we do not have to be controlled by our thoughts, speech, and action. We can be in control. And therefore, this is so important today, specifically what this world is going through. There's so many people are saying, I'm just feeling down the whole day. I'm crying the whole day. I'm thinking of the terrible things that are happening. And while obviously it is appropriate, to feel for what's going on in Israel, but if this is going to bring you down to feeling of depression, Kabbalah tells us, because this is our thought, speech, and action, we have the ability to focus on something else. We have the ability to choose to change that clothing and to now feel my choices, my thoughts, speech, and action will reflect something else. And this is something which is very empowering. I want to, again, I know it's 9 o'clock. I will give you 3 more minutes. I want to read the following story. In text number 8, there was once a sage who sent a drawing of his face to, how do you pronounce that? Physiognomist, which is a master who discerns temperament and character from one's outward appearance. When the master saw the drawing, he immediately blocked his face in fright. The messenger who brought the drawing asked him, "Why have you blocked your face from looking at the drawing?" The master replied, "I've never seen the face of such a horrible person before. I saw in him coveting, adultery, and robbery. One shouldn't gaze at the face of such evil." The messenger was obviously terrified of bringing back this reading to the sage. However, the sage sent word that he should return without fear. Upon his return, the sage inquired about what had occurred. The messenger conveyed everything that he had heard, concluding, "That's why I was afraid to return to you." The sage replied, "Surely this I could however you pronounce it, outshines all others. Everything he said about me is true. My internal inclination drives me and seduces me to commit all the wrongdoings that the master saw. Yet I use my wisdom to refrain from acting on it." Over here, this is telling us a person may internally have terrible traits, but this does not need to reflect on what the person does, how the person speaks, and even how a person thinks, because these are our clothing. And therefore, we have the ability to control. You see over here, we have control. Even if my natural tendency even if my natural tendency leans towards arrogance, I can still act modestly. Even if my character is more cynical, I can still speak favorably of others. Even if my inclination is to be anxious, I can still think calming thoughts. Because we are in control of our thought, speech, and action. We should not allow it to control us. And we learned this from the way God created this world, Bri Yitzir Sira, which corresponds to our thought, speech, action, which just like those worlds were outside of God. These three, thought, speech, and action, are outside of us. They're external to us. They are not who we are. They don't define who we are. And we have the ability to control them. And finally, so many mitzvahs we do involve all three of these things. You have certain mitzvahs which are more action-oriented. Giving charity is action-oriented. Helping someone out is action, or putting on tefillin, lighting Shabbat candle is action-oriented. Then you have those mitzvahs which are speech-oriented, whether it's praying, whether it's what we should say, what we shouldn't say, when we should say, saying the Shema. And then you have mitzvahs which are thought-oriented, having the love of God, the fear of God, not coveting. Those are thought-oriented. And in many mitzvahs, you have all three expressions. What are the three expressions? Many mitzvahs involve all three. You have the action of the mitzvah. You have the saying of the blessing prior to the mitzvah. Let's talk about lighting Shabbat candles. You light the candle, there is the blessing, and then there's the thought, the intention that's involved in the particular mitzvah. We're going to leave with one idea, one practical idea. If you want to take something practical of today's class, again, besides these two lessons of, again, the fact that when we're making a decision, we should follow the three steps. And we have control over our thought, speech, and action. Torah tells us, Halacha tells us, every single morning, what should be our first three steps when we wake up is these three things. The first thing we do, before the Modani is the speech. The first thing is the thought. Let's take a look at text number 10. We'll finish with this. As soon as we wake up, we should contemplate, page number 30. We should contemplate before whom we are laying and become aware that the King of Kings is close at hand. As it is stated, the entire earth is filled with his glory. You wake up, first thing you should do is take a minute, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, however long it takes, before saying the Modani. Think about God. Think how God returned your soul to you. Have that gratitude. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it is best to habituate ourselves immediately upon waking to recite Modani. Here's the speech. I thank you, living and eternal King, for your mercifully restored are my soul within me. Great is your faithfulness. This will remind us of God's intimate presence and inspire us to rise energetically. Here we have the speech. And what's the third step? The action. Seeing that the Modani does not include a divine name, we are permitted to recite it before ritually washing our hands. The third step is, Halacha says, you should go and wash your hands. Wash your hands, a certain sense of purity. When you wake up, there's a certain impurity on your hands. You go and you wash your hands and say the blessing of Al Natilat Yadayim. Here are the three steps. Again, first thing is thought, that thought of gratitude. Then we have speech, Modani. And finally, we have the action of purifying our day by washing our hands. Daily preparation. Contemplate God's relevance to our lives, which is Beria. Then we recite Modani, verbalizing gratitude for the gift of another day, which is Yitzira. And finally, washing our hands, which brings purity to our day through action, which is the Asiya. And again, this is how it mirrors the three steps of creation and the three steps in our own soul of the three Levushay and Nefesh. The three garments of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action, which again, we always have control over. And in general, in our decisions, we should follow these three steps. Next week, we'll be going to the Sefirot. More internal, more our emotions and what drives our emotions, how they are in God, and how they mirror themselves in our own lives. Sorry for going 5 minutes over time. I hope to see everyone next week. Yes. All right, let me stop the recording.